Okay, and welcome back. We're going to talk about a very important, a very dark, a very evil, a subject that may go beyond evil. It may be something of a supernatural nature, an inhuman, a non-human, a subhuman, multidimensional. I don't know what it is, but there's something at the very top of this planet, as I have been saying for a long time, that is not human in the sense that you or I understand or can relate to, or can even comprehend. Something very dark is running the show. I have come to believe that it is part and parcel of the power structure in every major community in this country, every city, every town, every county government, judges, fire chiefs, attorneys certainly, psychologists, psychiatrists who work with people who say they've been sexually, satanically abused. The Satanists, the Luciferians, the evil ones, are in charge. I call it the cult for short. It runs to the highest levels of national and international government and to the lowest levels of your own community. You would not believe who in your community is involved with the Luciferian satanic cult. Ritual satanic sex abuse is widespread. It is rampant. Every time a little girl of the age of 5 or 6 is raped, repeatedly, violated in any way you can imagine by various male and even females, a variant of a personality is formed. That leads to what is called multiple personality disorder, or MPD. People who have MPD, who have been ravaged and have had their lives destroyed forever as little children and as adults, are owned. They are property of the cult. They are called upon later on to do various jobs. They are sent to take various people down. I have had personal experience with this. They also, in many ways, are programmed to suicide at a relatively early age. You'll find many of them have had multiple suicide attempts because the cult wants the evidence to go away. Once the little girl and little boy grow up, they're not really needed. Some are kept around, as I said, to be used as mass shooters, and then ultimately to commit suicide, shoot themselves in the head, or they're taken out by part of a hit team that is actually anything but the lone gunman. It's a very complicated story, and to talk about this hour is a man that is, I think, as steeped in study in this field as anybody could possibly be. His name is Russ Dizdar, D-I-Z-D-A-R, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right. He's an extraordinarily articulate and well-versed man in this field, and I'm very pleased to have him on the program tonight. I suspect we're going to do 2 or 3 programs about this. Russ, welcome to the program.
Jeff, thanks for having us on. Great to be here with you.
All right, did I sum this up reasonably well?
Very, very well. Very well.
Is it, in fact, as widespread, in your opinion, as I believe it to be?
Sure, and we have been on the field almost 30 years with this. So when we began to deal with the victims, we eventually had to begin to track it backwards to see why there were so many that were coming to us, coming to other individuals. We began to go to the conferences, reading the books, but that was the earlier 80s, and then up to this date now, the tracking is this way, Jeff. It's secular reports by Holly Hector at Centennial Hospital in Denver in the ritual abuse ward in 1994, 2.4 million cases. Colin Ross later articulates possibly 10 million. Now, I don't know if those are correct, but we do know this. Every city we've been to, and I'm able to say now, every single city in the United States has the victims. Mm-hmm. In the psych wards, in counseling centers, churches are showing up with them left and right. When I say Los Angeles or New York or Cleveland, then we're talking thousands over a 30-year period in those cities. Now, these are the victims.
Sure.
But you can't be one of them unless somebody made you. Which means in every city where the victims are, even if there was just one, somebody was behind the selecting of them,
yes,
the abuse, the splitting, and all the rest.
A group was at work, clearly.
Absolutely. And that's what we've tracked. That's what we engaged. And once we begin to go after it, track, sure enough, we find individuals that are very angry, and there's a methodology in their changing handlers, and there's a whole world to this, Jeff. It is big, and we're seeing it on the field as far as the shooters, and but it's also not explained well in the psychiatric community as far as the terminology.
I would, if I might suggest one thing, and I've been told this, many of the key psychiatrists and psychologists who deal with victims are in fact part of the cult to control the damage and to keep the lid on the whole thing. Exactly.
Control and keep the lid. And for the psychological community to say that they don't know a whole lot, or it's rare, or it's debatable.
They're lying through their teeth.
Sure. And we can go back and see, we don't have to use our literature or what we think. We can go back to 1947, G.H. Estabrooks, who wrote a book called Hypnotism. He was a world-renowned, I say in the bad way, but world-renowned psychiatrist, psychologist, I mean the world over, hired by U.S. military. In his book, Jeff, he explains how they've learned to cause and to create multiple personalities or alter personalities in soldiers. He defines then how they will program or use those sub-persons without the main person knowing. Assassins, reconnaissance agents, infiltrators, sowers of disinformation. And then in that same literature, the book, in 1947, he says, what we need to do is create enough of these kind of individuals placed in every single department of U.S. military to have a hidden sleeper fifth column. Those are his words.
Wow. All right. And this is again, what year?
1947. That's
right.
How far back it goes.
All right. Well, it goes back probably thousands of years, but ultimately in the modern age, that's a good 70 years worth, very close to it. This is now something that has to be considered a cold science. It is not guesswork. It is not just throwing things out there and hoping it might work. They know exactly how to do this. The victim, the young person, male or female, who was raped, and that's how they do it. They break them down before their personalities are completely formed by the age of 6 or 7. The victims never know that they are, in fact, multiples. They don't have immediate access to that. Sometimes, once in a while, they get hold of that and are able to deal with it a little bit. But quickly, if the cult finds out about it, they're brought back under control. This is not something of programming where the person needs to be picked up, needs to be taken somewhere and programmed. They can do this, I am told, over the telephone. In fact, they'll program a victim with a code word. Let's say circus. The victim will get a phone call. Hello? Circus. Circus. And the victim goes into a trance. And the programming begins. They don't have to show up physically. And the person will never know, never, that they have been completely co-opted and controlled by the darkest forces of evil. Is that a fair statement?
It's clearly a fair statement, and we've been in homes where we were hiding victims out, where we, in the early days when we didn't know enough, but phone calls just like that would come in. Sometimes, like the phrase that you just mentioned, a similar phrase, or numbers, or just the tones. Just simply tones. Yeah, sure. Okay, a series of tones will trigger a shutdown, will trigger a runner inside, will trigger someone inside to go to a meet place, to meet them. Mm-hmm. Very, very sophisticated. Even a mic, like we heard a noise. It just sounded like a blip that came in. Slowing it down, what it is a speeded up message. Sometimes in Spanish or a different language even. But it's just a coded, it's a full message, but speeded up. A certain personality can hear it. They come forward and then they get the message. And just like you said, we've observed this with our own eyes to see it happen.
So it's a burst output of instruction that the subconscious can pull in and decipher once the subconscious has been put into the proper transconfiguration to take in data. They could just zap it right in.
Absolutely.